Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Denver and welcome to Mountain Connect. So, what do you think of our new home? Thank you. If you were not here yesterday, you missed out on a great day, an amazing day of education, networking, a really fun golf tournament, and of course our welcome reception. But if timing is everything, we have had good fortune the last 2 years. Last year we were the first national event after the notice of funding opportunity, and this year we are the first event after the funding allocation announcement. I'm very grateful that you've made the decision to make Mountain Connect the first stop on your bead journey. So, what can you expect this year? We have 15 state broadband offices for you to engage with, learn from, and who are featured speakers on our agenda. We have approximately 58 sessions and nearly 200 speakers. There's an echo here. And I mentioned we have 200 speakers, and they're all experts in their field of discipline. Sorry about that. We have 92 exhibitors and 36 sponsors, and attendance from more than 6 countries. But what we have in front of us is vital to the future sustainability of this country. And we need to ensure that we spend BEAD funding in the right places, guaranteeing equitable access and opportunities for all. We have a very diverse and robust agenda, and if you can't find help here this week, well, you simply can't find it. I wanted to finish my remarks by doing something a bit different this year. I've created a video that I hope you all will enjoy, followed by a surprise or an unveiling. But first, there are many people I need to thank. So although not present, I want to give a huge thank you to Trina Coffey from Coffee Events. She provided invaluable guidance as I tried to navigate my first event at a Tier 1 hotel. I also want to thank the Sheridan Group sales team, and especially Michelle Dolan and Jimmy Bailey. I seem to be blessed with collaborative partners wherever I land, and these two are certainly no different. Our conference registration would not be the same without Lisa Washington and Kirsty McPherson, who are celebrating their 5th year with us. They take time away from their full-time jobs and families to be here, and I know it's because they enjoy working with you all. Now, there's not a big enough thank you bucket for Mr. Doug Adams. Doug, I'm very grateful for your passion for precision and accuracy, your love of being a part of this event, and most of all, your friendship. And then finally, this event would not be possible without the support and collaboration of our sponsors and exhibitors. Please find them and thank them. And of course, I want to thank each and every person here, as 2023 is the largest Mountain Connect yet, with over 850 attendees. So please, you already gave yourself a round of applause, but thank you. And as previously mentioned, I wanted to start with a short video I've created for you, so
Innovation.
please enjoy.
The future belongs to those who embrace the power of connectivity. Welcome to the forefront of possibility. Today we stand united, recognizing the importance of BEAD federal funding. Together, we can build broadband networks that pave the way for the emerging technologies that will shape our future. But first, we must acknowledge the challenges we face. Our current broadband infrastructure struggles to keep up with the demands of a rapidly evolving world. And today, not everyone has access. Digital inequity is not an option. We have an opportunity to finally do what is right with BEAD. It can be a catalyst for change, an opportunity to create the foundation upon which our digital future will be built for all. Imagine a world where robotics and automation revolutionize industries, where 8K embedded video applications enable immersive experiences, where diagnostic telehealth applications connect patients and doctors across vast distances. Envision a world where immersive teleconferencing bridges gaps, where augmented and virtual reality applications bring new dimension to education, healthcare, and entertainment. With BEAD funding, we have the power to turn these dreams into reality. By investing in robust broadband networks, we unlock the transformative potential of emerging technologies no matter where you live or your economic standing. Today, we call upon you, the visionaries, the leaders. Seize this opportunity to shape the future. With you at Mountain Connect, our 15 state broadband offices representing $15.3 billion in BEAD dollars. Let us join forces and harness the potential of BEAD funding. Together, we will build the broadband networks of tomorrow, ensuring that no one is left behind in this era of limitless possibilities. In a world...
Thank you. So, what are you prepared to do? And I hope you all agree with the main message of that video. Let us leave no one, not one person behind this time, as we will have no excuses with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in front of us. So now on to the surprise, but I think I need to provide a little bit of background. In 2021, I outlined 9 issues I thought the industry needed to focus on. And the last item on that list was emerging technology applications. I suggested then, and I maintain today, that emerging technology applications will have the most profound impact on the networks that we will build from BEAD, and frankly, on all networks. So I'm sure by now you've guessed that I'm going to unveil some cool emerging technology application, and you would be right. But I think this next part's going to require a little help, so I'm going to invite Mr. Leonard Lee to the stage. So a little bit about Leonard as he approaches the stage. Leonard is a renowned industry analyst and strategy consultant who advises some of the leading technology, media, and telecommunications companies globally. He has 30 years of experience in industry and tech research, as well as technology and strategy consulting with the likes of IBM, Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Gartner before starting his own firm, NextCurve. He's widely published in Forbes, Bloomberg, RCR Wireless, Fierce Telecom, and is a top influencer in 5G, IoT, Industry 4.0, amongst other categories. He's also an avid guitar player and co-hosts one of the leading IoT podcasts in the world, IoT Coffee Talk. Welcome, Leonard. That came out too early. So on a personal note, because personal notes are always good, and my surprise came out before it was supposed to, but as it always happens. I first met Leonard during the pandemic of all weird times on an app called Clubhouse through a mutual friend. And as I think about it, I've spent more time with you in Spain than I have in the U.S. Yes. So welcome, Leonard.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and welcome everyone. This is looks like it's going to be a fantastic event, and I'm looking forward to meeting many of you. Sorry.
Where are my microphones? Sorry, we have to do a little. We're going to do something that has never been done before, especially in telecom in the Americas, and we're actually going to interview this robot. So this is Temi, and when we're done here, I'll explain how Temi will be used during the rest of the conference. Hello, Temi. Hey, Temi.
Oh, there we go.
I have some questions for you that I would like you to answer for our audience. Are you ready?
I am ready. Please ask your questions, Jeff.
In order, Temmie, in order for you to be fully functional, what minimum internet capacity is required to support your connection to the cloud? Temmie? Hey, Temmie. In order for you to be fully functional, what minimum internet capacity is required to support your connection to the cloud?
I am glad that you asked this question. I will require a minimum bandwidth of 3 megabytes for downstream and upstream to function. I would rather have a minimum latency wherever I go.
Hey, Temmie. During Mountain Connect, you'll be connected to the cloud using a SIM card connected to 5G. But can you also fully function connected to Wi-Fi?
My older generations used Wi-Fi only. But me, Generation 3, I can use both, and I am programmed to use one as the failover for other one.
All right, cool.
Hey, Temmie. With the pace of current technological advancements, what future developments can we anticipate in the field of robotics?
I foresee a future where robotics will become even more intertwined with our daily lives. This could include advanced automation in sectors like healthcare, education, and domestic services.
Hey, Temmie. In what particular scenarios can we expect to see robots being increasingly utilized within the home, and how might they revolutionize our day-to-day lives?
A future where robotics will become even more intertwined with our daily lives. This could include advanced automation in sectors like healthcare, education, and domestic services.
One more question. Hey, Temmie, what demands will a fully functioning robot place on telecommunications infrastructure, and what advancements or modifications are necessary to support the full range of capabilities?
For a fully functional AI-enabled robot, a stable and high-speed telecommunications infrastructure is paramount. This would include robust internet connectivity for data transmission, low-latency networks for real-time operations, and edge computing capabilities for quick data processing. In addition, the availability and reliability of these networks are crucial to prevent any disruption of services. As robots and AI continue to evolve, there will likely be a need for ongoing updates to telecommunications infrastructure to keep pace with the advanced capabilities of robots. Furthermore, and in advanced technology scenarios, where the robot needs to perform real-time analytics, manipulate large 3D models, or utilize virtual or augmented reality, the required internet capacity could reach 10 gigabits per second or more, especially for multiple simultaneous connections.
Hey, Temmie, thank you. That was very instructive. Will you now return to your home base? Let's see if she listens.
That was nice talking to you, Jeff. Wish you a great conference.
Awesome.
So now I've got a couple questions for you, Leonard.
Yeah, sure.
So,
You know what, Jeff, I want to tell you, that was really interesting. That was my first time ever interacting with a droid, and very enlightened droid, by the way.
yeah, well, it was quite a task to get that prepared for what we just did. So, and sometimes the technology that I have doesn't match the technology that has. So as I mentioned, you know, Mountain Connect is the first telecom conference in the Americas to showcase this kind of technology as a connectivity use case. Mm-hmm. And this is why I did this, right? Because during the conference, this robot will have to touch the cloud in order to function. So as the amazing industry analyst that you are, do you feel we need to showcase more emerging technology applications?
Well, yeah, I think it's important because it's not, I mean, we need to really build a case for the connectivity, right? And I think some of the traditional use cases that we think about and applications, they're there, but, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to expand our perspective on what kind of value connectivity can bring to lives, right? And so what are we trying to do here at Mountain Connect? We're trying to figure out how to provide a quality of service, an enhanced quality of service that's more ubiquitous than it is today, more available to a broader population. And so having also a sense of how the connectivity is going to enable new applications, and I think the operative word here is not just technology, but the application of technology, which, by the way, I love that you mentioned application, right? Because a lot of folks don't think in terms of application, they think in terms of technology, but we just saw a really compelling application. And there are many, many more out there, obviously, right? And during the pandemic, what did we learn? We learned that it was difficult for children to participate in remote learning. We learned that emergency services, healthcare, all these critical services were also really unevenly available across the U.S. and other countries. And so, I think showcasing these types of emerging technological applications across different domains is going to be really, really important in building the case for rural broadband and broadband in general.
So what I find interesting is robots like Temi are already being used in some homes and certainly in retail in some parts of this country. So what kind of time frame do you foresee where we'll have more of an impact from emerging technology applications?
Well, quite honestly, I think
And
it's...
advanced, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Advanced emerging technology applications.
Well, that was pretty advanced. I think today, and so I spend a lot of time going to a lot of conferences. Many of the clients that I work with are some of the leading technology companies in the world. And I can tell you right now, there's a ton of technology and emerging applications that could really change lives and the way that we work, the way that we live, and transform industries. And I think one of the, probably the most important emerging industries where we're really starting to look at how these emerging technologies can bring transformative benefit is agriculture, right? And so it really is now, right? And I think one of the key things that we need to do here is, and what I really appreciate about what you're trying to do here, Jeff, in highlighting some of these emerging technologies, is expand that awareness, right? Because there are a lot of folks who don't know about these emerging technologies, their potential, how they can be applied across industries in our lives, and so go for it. I think it's fantastic, and it'll be vital in the future for, again, as I said, building a holistic, comprehensive case for broadband.
Well, thank you, Leonard. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're a good sport for doing this. And listen, I'll say one last thing. It's not just the one application that's important to consider here. It is the use of multiple applications at the same time, so the aggregate use, which is going to have the biggest impact. But please expect to see more fun stuff like Temi in the future here. And by the way, this would not be possible without the collaboration and support from ETI and Broadband.money. Now, they will be using these robots to feature their solution sets and helping to educate you on their value. So please stop by their booth. You probably will see Temi roaming around the exhibit hall, so please engage with the robot. There are two, so please enjoy. Now, I need to move on. So I mentioned earlier that this conference would not be possible without the collaboration of our sponsors, and that is no exception with our first speaker, Mr. Scott Neuman from Calix. Scott is the Vice President of Corporate Marketing for Calix, and Scott is going to spend some time with you talking about Calix. So thank you, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so Jeff, I have a bone to pick with you. You put me up after the talking robot? Seriously? Come on. I mean, who wants to be on stage after that? The good news is there's a very common thread that Leonard and Jeff just hit on, which is, what are you going to do after you build an amazingly fast network, and where does that go? So let me just tell some stories. I'm not going to actually talk about Calix. I actually want to talk about some of you in the audience and some other providers that are doing exactly that. So, see the slides going up on the sides? I want to make sure you guys can see what I'm actually referring to. Let's give it 1 second. I see it here.
Oh, you do see it then?
Yeah.
These guys are going to have to.
Okay. We good? Okay, no worries. Tap dance. So there are 3 things that I'm going to leave you with today as this gets going up. And it's always good to start thinking about rule of 3s, easy to remember. First, I'll talk about how the competition is coming. It may not be here today, it may not be tomorrow or next year, but it is coming. 2, they're going to want to get you into a race to zero. It's all going to be about fast and cheap and who can squeeze their margin and hold it long enough, who has the pain threshold. So the third takeaway is, what are you going to do? And it's all about differentiating your brand through value-added advanced services, what we call managed services, but those are applications. It's a whole range of approaches. But that is what's going to win the market for you. So, not sure I can get going with my charts. Let me start. There we go. Perfect. So, we talked a little bit about funding. I mean, this is like the golden age of funding access, whether you start with CAF, CAF2, RDOF, now you're into BEAD, about $42 billion and counting that's going to be coming into NTIA executives at the state level. So a massive opportunity for you, but it's also a massive opportunity for your competitors. You have to know that the major telco giants and cable providers, they're lobbying like crazy for that money. So if you don't get it, they will. But there's also a private side to this. And the right side of this chart, the private equity side, what's really interesting is there's a ton of excitement in your space. Why? Because investing in fast, reliable, fiber-built broadband is a really smart investment. And there's a ton happening in this space as well. Takeaway, capital has never been easier to get a hold of to bring down your CapEx, grow, and expand. So let's look at that grow and expand. So today, we could look at the country at about 43% coverage, and you generally can imagine, well, sure, okay, it all started in the cities and it worked its way to the suburbs, and eventually it gets further out into more of a rural market. And it's generally around what we call the NFL cities. However, fast forward, and you get to 2026, we're going to likely see coverage like this, exactly as a result of that kind of funding. Where is that growth happening? In rural America. These are all those small little hamlets where I'm from, in a small little town called Norwich, Vermont, about 3,000 people. These are the little towns that are going to get covered by the likes of you. So let me ask you a question. Any football fans in the audience? You like the NFL? Okay, good. So I'm assuming you watched the Super Bowl this past year, yeah? Okay. Anybody spot the 2 commercials that were from our industry that were during that? T-Mobile and Comcast. Okay. Anybody remember the only 2 numbers that were shown in those ads? Pregnant pause. 5 gig and 10 gig. Cheap and fast. Anyone know how much 30 seconds on the Super Bowl cost this year? $7 million. These were 60-second ads played twice. So, if you're curious, they just tipped their hand. They tipped their hand to the whole world. Our game plan is fast and cheap. That's all they care about. So, let's talk about fast and cheap. We did a survey. Actually, many of you in the room participated in this, and we went to fiber providers all over the country, and we asked for at least a gig or gig plus service. When you rolled it out, what were your tiers? What was your adoption rate? And you'd think, based on the conversation we just had, as soon as you roll out a gig, everybody's going to want a gig, right? Wrong. 70% of your subscribers are actually at 500 megs or less. Why? Because subscribers don't truly understand speed. They don't know the difference between a gig on copper and a gig on fiber. They actually don't even know how much speed they need. I mean, Temi knows. She knows how much she needs, to get through the day. But your average subscriber doesn't get that. The general takeaway is once you're fast enough, speed becomes irrelevant. The question is, what can they do with that amazing speed that you've enabled them? Because otherwise, you're going to be relegated to the top right corner of this chart, and you're going to be dealing with margin challenges all the way down. Nothing differentiated, just fast and cheap. So you're going to become super easy to switch from because it's whoever's going to offer the next best cheap broadband package and give away some free stuff. So while you're at it, throw in the free toaster. Why not, right? What else have you got? So you're going to ask yourself the question, are you playing for the long game? What is the longer play that can allow you to claim the strategic high ground? So then when those major players come showing up and rolling into your town with fast and cheap, your subscribers are saying, no thank you. I love my broadband provider. So let me talk about a few examples that are actually doing just that. They're playing for the long game. But before I get into the stories themselves, let's just level set on what I would consider 6 core tenets of building amazing broadband. First and foremost, if you're going to build out into previously unconnected, underserved communities, that it should be affordable and easy to manage. Okay, makes sense. Second, as you're doing that, you shouldn't have to compromise for the environment. You should be thinking about power consumption. This is a pretty big energy-driven market, and everything from your central office all the way out to the subscriber premises, you want to be thinking about power consumption and how can you bring that down. Third, there is a dark side to the web, so you want to be thinking about kids and making sure they're not exposed to malicious content with parental controls. Fourth, worry about cyber hacking. You want advanced security and make sure those families feel safe and they don't have to worry about their passwords getting compromised and then a whole slew of hacking and scams coming through the network. Fifth, teenagers, social, cyberbullying, major issue. It's actually now a pandemic in a health sense, according to the CDC. I mean, this is a major challenge for the teenagers. For me, and when I grew up, none of this was even a thing, obviously. So completely magnified. So when children are bullied, their parents should know. And then finally, no kid should have to drive back into town at night, park outside a McDonald's and draft off the Wi-Fi so they can upload their homework for the night. So I think we can all agree that those are the basics. And the good news is, all of you are generally doing this today. You get that. But then what? So let's start with one example. Nextlight. So Nextlight, really interesting story. They got going in 2014 and within 3 years, Longmont was Denver's first gig city. They were recognized by PC Magazine as the second fastest broadband provider in the country. So now you're thinking, well, Scott, you just said speed isn't the point. It's not. It's important. It's a base case. But again, once you're fast enough, speed becomes irrelevant. So they went further. They rebranded and created a mobile app, Nextlight Wi-Fi, put it in the hands of their subscribers so they can control their experience. They added on advanced parental controls, advanced security capabilities, and backed up by amazing customer service. The result? 98% customer sat. How do you think Comcast is going to feel when they try to roll into Longmont? They're not going to get a lot of takers. Why? Because Nextlight gets it. They're playing for the long game. Another example, Jade. So Jade already doing everything I just described that Longmont's doing, but they took it a step further and they started thinking about, well, what more could we do as a sticky service that we know our subscribers would love? So they started to partner with Arlo cameras, and they started to develop a managed service for connected cameras. And at first you think, oh, geez, it's do it yourself and you ship the box and they get it wrong. No, this is actually a white glove service that their customers are willing to pay for. And they come as a truck roll and set the whole thing up. They developed a multi-channel campaign a couple of years ago, and they identified who would be the most likely subscribers in their coverage area that would be really open to this kind of offer. Within 10 minutes of launching their campaign, they got their first order. Within 2 years, they have a 242% ROI on this campaign. Those that they targeted, they got 90% adoption and doubled their ARPU. So let me be clear. These are customers that are now paying twice as much for a service that they love, and they love them for it. Their base NPS is about a plus 55 with just kind of the managed Wi-Fi. Those subscribers that have the advanced Arlo package, 90%, an NPS of 90. That's unheard of in our industry. This is another player that's playing for the long game. Three Rivers. So unfortunately, really sad story, earlier this spring, in 2 of the 3 communities that Three Rivers served, there were teen suicides. So what did Three Rivers do? They stepped up, they added Bark to their portfolio, and Bark is a social media monitoring application that can be managed by the provider, but it's a very closed loop. It's the parent and it's the kids. And they put the app on their mobile devices because obviously kids get outside the home every once in a while, so you want to travel with them. It will comb through with AI technology all of roughly 30 plus social media channels looking for malicious content and sentiment analysis, potentially sparking that there's a bullying going on. And what happens? The parent gets alerted. And Bark has resources to work with that parent to say, hey, you need to have a difficult conversation. Let me give you some guidelines on how to talk to your child about what's happening. So now, Three Rivers is working with local school boards and administrators to look for any kids that they see that are at risk at the school, and they're immediately offering Bark to those subscribers for free. Why? Because Three Rivers cares about the communities that they serve. This is exactly the kind of thing that you won't get from one of the major providers coming in. They don't know this. They're not thinking about that. Finally, SE Telecom. So in addition to doing an amazing smart home capabilities and deploying out experiences that are on top of their network, they wanted to go beyond and get into the small business space. And when I say get into the small business space, many of you are in the small business space. Sadly, sometimes you could sum it up as, I've got a residential gateway, I throw it into the business, I charge them twice as much because they're a business, and they can kind of see right through that, right? Especially if they live in your network and they're like, wait a minute, isn't that the same unit I got at home? I'm not sure, that's twice as expensive now. So they've identified 172 small businesses. So think of less than 50 employees, no tech, no staff, nothing like that for that. And they've got some serious needs, right? They're going to need 4 dedicated channels. They're going to want one for the management to run the business. They're going to want one for their staff, and easy to add and remove staff because, depending on your business model, that could be some high turnover. Then they want one for their point of service devices so they can keep the business up and running, and then they're going to want a 4th one for their customers that come in and they have a secure Wi-Fi system. This is a company that is, or a provider, that is thinking specifically about purpose-built solutions for small businesses so they can thrive. It's just another example of the kind of service you're not going to get from the major players because these guys are playing for the long game. So in closing, let me remind you of the 3 things. Competition's coming. And no matter where you are in the country, you may not feel it, but it's going to come. It may actually come from one of the other friends in the room sitting at a table with you today. Who knows? Because they're going to be building out. Second, don't be betting your business on I can go fast and cheap longer than the big guys. It's not a fun game, and you don't want to be in it. So what do you want to do? You want to think about creating amazing experiences that differentiate your brand, that your consumers will love you for, and your community will thrive as a result. And as Jeff said, as a marketing guy, the one thing I do have to say, and a little bit of a small pitch, is I'm hoping that your next stop on your getting into the fall tour is coming from Mountain Connect, and then we'll see you in Vegas in October at Connections. We've got an amazing show set up, and we've got something for everybody. General managers, marketers, customer support leaders, broadband operators, and network engineers. So I hope to see you there, and I hope to see you around the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Scott. So I need to keep things simple, so we're going to get to our next keynote, so we have another Scott. That's why I don't have to remember complex names. So, as I mentioned before, and I'll say it again, this event would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. And I am really grateful for Scott and Jace, if Jace is here somewhere. Very grateful for their support this year. And it is my pleasure to introduce the one and only Scott to the stage. Oh, sorry. Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean that. I'm kidding. Thanks, Scott.
That's all I get? Come on, clap up. Wake up. Here we go. There we go. Much better. Let's get this situated here.
By the way, is this not working?
It's working.
Oh, okay. By the way, he didn't ask for any walk-up music this year.
I did not ask for walk-up music this year. We're going to do the walk-up robot this year. So. All right, let's get this together real quick. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Come on, we can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. How are you? All right, so if you're not taking notes, I'm going to ask you to please put your devices down and pay attention. Thank you. So let's get this. I'm going to get this presentation up in a second, and we're going to start. I'm going to start by talking about the principle of the data-driven broadband office. And if I can get this, there we go. Let's get that down here, and let's get this up, and we are going to get started. Let's go full screen. There we are. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Woods. I am the president of public-private partnerships for a company called Ready.net and Broadband.money. Is our product. We're proud to be the title sponsors for this year's Mountain Connect. On a personal level, it was just last year, Mountain Connect, when it was in Keystone in May, that I was introduced to all of you who were attended by my former boss, Alan Davidson. It's been a hell of a year since departing NTIA and joining a progressive company like Ready and Broadband Money and doing what we do to help unserved and underserved communities and providers across the country and state broadband offices take advantage of this historical federal funding in broadband. But so as you know, in the last, 2 months, a lot of things have happened. State broadband offices are about to be flooded, and the fundamental question that we're asking everyone, including our stakeholders, is, are you ready? And what you'll hear from in, just shortly are 4 of the leading broadband offices that are using data to conduct their stakeholder outreach and local engagement. They're working with their local service provider community. They're working to implement BEAD and their initial proposals, and you'll hear from them in just a few minutes. So if you can just bear with me for a second. But they're balancing a ton of stakeholders, and many of you in this room are among the stakeholders here, right? NTIA and the litany of guidance that comes out, it seems to come out every week and every month. Right now, what's governing is the challenge process. There are other things that are happening that we're waiting on that's going to impact and influence how the BEAD and Digital Equity Act programs are manifested. We have monopolist lobbyists who know that BEAD could change everything, and some are working to assist you. Unfortunately, some are not. We have tribes that specifically have data sovereignty issues, and working with tribes requires a specific approach and touch. Local regional governments, many of you are small and local non-traditional providers, the champions who are going to solve the digital divide in unserved and underserved communities, and especially in our rural underserved and urban overlooked. So, BEAD implementation is the dragon, and our state directors are the knights in seemingly shining armor. But there's a fog over this BEAD implementation. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of opposition, and there's a lot of support. And so, how the hell do we manage all of this and continue to move forward? The answer is be data-driven, right? So if I preface that again, you look at the fog of BEAD, unknown, uncertainty. Data-driven is that cockpit, that airline that guides all of your decisions and, again, leads you to the place that you want to be, which is ultimately that safe landing. Notice that I said it guides your decision. It does not make your decisions for you, but data-driven guides you to be more transparent, to be more open, to be more honest, to be more objective, to invite more stakeholders to the table, because again, everyone is operating, again, from that same frame of reference. So, the question I have for you Matrix fans, do you want to take the blue pill and go back to the way things were? Or we're taking the red pill and we're moving forward, engaging with new technologies and new applications as we saw here with the Timmy robot? The question is up to you. Many state broadband offices and their directors have decided to take the red pill. They want to move forward and ensure that this historic funding will address the actual needs of solving or addressing significantly the digital divide in unserved and underserved communities. So what do we need, right? We need a number of different things to make sure that the data that we use, that you utilize, actually will help you make the decisions that you need to ensure, again, that these programs, these funds, the private equity money, everything that's on top of that, make sure that it's going into the right place. And so our state offices are doing a number of different things. They're balancing a number of different hats. And again, we need to ensure that we're there to help them. Moving on to the next slide, please. There we go. So step number one, and I'll be quick, we want to encourage broad participation. That means encouraging diverse stakeholder groups to participate in your grant programs, right? How do we open up the tent, have a bigger table, provider community, our members of unserved and underserved communities, our political and non-political stakeholders? How do we get all of them to the table, be a fundamental part of the process, and then establish those fair, fundamental, fair processes that you'll need? We need to enable deep partnerships, so not only stakeholder engagement and bringing people to the table, but meaningful partnerships that can take advantage of the opportunities that exist, right? So how do we do that? Can we keep that up? Thank you. You want to manage all of your stakeholders in one provider relationship platform. Anchor institutions, again, multiple housing units, MDUs that are not reflected in Fabric. Notice no one has talked about Fabric yet. Anybody know what Fabric is? Anybody really care what Fabric is? Are you all awake this morning? Like, what's going on? Okay, all right, I'm just trying to help. You don't want to be helped? That's on you. Precision outperforms politics. I'm going to say that again. Precision outperforms politics. Don't make the mistake that all of this, historic funding by our state broadband offices are impacted or will be impacted by politics. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, we want to ensure that our state broadband offices won't succumb to political pressure from anyone, from any group, and being data-driven drives that, right? Is there tier 1 Karens in the house? I saw some, no, I'm joking, I didn't see any here. Come on, y'all, it's a joke. Can you laugh? Loosen up? Like, what's going on? Like, we're here to have fun, right? If you don't love what you do, what the hell are you doing for? You just want to fly out to Denver and almost die like I did yesterday from altitude sickness? Like, what's going on? All right, tier 1 Karens, I'm calling your governor. Some of you have the governors on speed dial. You might do it through your lobbyists. Some of you call them up directly, but you're not going to stop us, right? Number 4, how do we iterate to amazing? Anyone understands what that means? That means that we are constantly moving forward, and we acknowledge that we do make missteps, but we learn from our missteps, and we continue to iterate to amazing, right? So let's talk about your challenge process, because that's the governing thing that all of us can take advantage of right now as we move forward, right? You have an opportunity to be a part of your state broadband office's implementation to determine where exactly the funds will be invested, and more importantly, to correct the fallacy of the Fabric maps that overstate coverage in some areas, understate coverage in some areas, and do a number of different things that we have an opportunity to correct in the challenge process. Right? We've come up with some tools that we've been rolling out, state broadband offices across the country. But again, it's more important that you participate in the challenge process, right? Whether you're a stakeholder, whether you're an ISP, you've got to participate. That's also in the rebuttal process as well, right? These guidance just came out, like the world is going crazy, it's on fire. But again, we still have to make sure that we are iterating to amazing. We have accurate maps that accurately depict the ground truth data of where broadband is and is not in our communities. And we need all of your help to participate in that, right? There are tools and techniques, challenges, there's dashboards, there's a lot of things that, again, that we've done on a geospatial level to help. And whether you take our services or not, totally up to you. But whatever you do, you have to be grounded in truth. You have to be grounded in data to ensure that we can overcome some of the legacy bureaucratic issues and political issues and opposition that we face in this country. Y'all with me? Yeah. All right, there we go. Much better. We're up now. Coffee is flowing. Saw some whiskey in the back. I saw an empty whiskey bottle in the back, so some of y'all are indulging a little too much. But number 5, we want to respect tribal data sovereignty. For those of you who will work in areas that have tribal nations and tribal areas, we got to make sure we respect that when you deal with that. And so that's very important, right? You got to engage with the tribal community, our brothers and sisters, the right way. They are sovereign nations. We've got to respect that data. You've got to build that in your process to ensure that we're treating and engaging our tribes the right way. Number 6, do the math, right? Any math majors in the house? No, you're all network geeks and policy people? No? We fall back asleep? All right, maybe they did, I don't know. But anyway, we want to make every dollar count, and we do that by ensuring that we have processes. We got to break down what it means to connect every home. Using data, you can do that on a household level. Using geospatial data, you can break that down even further on an individual level. Again, the goal is how do we use technology and data to make better decisions? I don't know about some of you. I plan on living for a while. This is going to be the last, probably biggest investment that this country makes in broadband and digital equity, and we absolutely have to get it right. So for those of you who won't be here when this comes around again, I'll be here, but I might not be on the stage, but I'll be in the back at the whiskey table over there. But we want to ensure that we're making every dollar count. We also have to go deeper, right? We have to get geospatial insights into how do we spend that money. We've got to ensure that we track all of the assets that we deploy, all the lives and communities that we touch. We can do that. We've got to track all of our network builds. Those of you who have been reluctant in the past to share your assets and where you've deployed or where you want to deploy, unfortunately, those days are over. Well, let me back up. Fortunately, those days are over, right? We were sensitive and we can protect the data, but we absolutely have to know what's deployed, where it's going, and how it's impacting so we can ensure that none of our communities will be left behind as we move forward, right? There's validation. There's organization profile. You can do HLD and high-level designs. You can upload and iterate again to amazing by doing your BOM analysis and cost analyses, right? We're no longer doing static PDFs when I was at NTIA and Excel spreadsheet uploads, right? That's a generation of the past. We're moving into the future. So how do we iterate to amazing if we don't engage in the right technological approach and using data to make sure that we can allocate costs down to the micro level, right? Juxtapose that with the fabric data. You can do costs. You can look at poverty concentrations. You can look at anchor institutions. You can come up with a scenario and a model to ensure every dollar that's spent is actually going to achieve the mission and the goal of BEAD and digital equity. And we can do that. And you don't need a spreadsheet or a napkin or a fancy calculator to be able to do that. We can utilize technology to do that, right? We can also utilize HLD and BOM high-level design, upload designs. We can give you a lot of what you need to estimate how much it's going to cost, where the assets are going to go, who's going to be impacted, and also what the expected results are going to be. So we can do all of that. Can't do it alone, we need your help to be able to do it. So the medium is the message. How do you contact and bring in a large, diverse stakeholder group, right? Some of you all deal with communities. I've been in community meetings where they don't have connectivity. So you're sending emails and sending them to websites to communities that don't have access, right? The FCC is known for doing that. Did this really big rollout on ACP requiring ACP enrollees to go to a website. Does that make any sense? No. You can say it. They're not here. Say it. No. There we go. Say it again. Say no. Okay. There we go. All right, everybody. I didn't say that. That may have been somebody named Doug Adams, but we don't know. Tools for 1,000 steps in your BEAD journey, right? You'll have to document everything that you do in BEAD and digital equity, right? There's no longer just, we're going to do it and we'll figure it out. You have to document that. You have to upload those documents to NTIA. The information has to be shared with your stakeholders. Almost finished. Anybody know how to say this? No, I don't either. So let's pretend it says, there you go, Anti-Canavada. Anybody knows what that means? Absolutely not. Well, it is a principle in Indian world, right? Jains, Buddhists, Hindus, recognizing the good qualities of many different points of view. The great thing about data is it's not monolithic. You get data from this group, it informs you. You get data from this group, it informs you, right? We want a wide swath of data and information from the various different stakeholder groups that we're interacting with in our communities. It's not monolithic, it's not the same. How do we do that? We've got to collect data, we've got to collect information, we've got to secure it, right? But we got to collect it, we've got to protect it, but then we've got to share the results and not be afraid, right? Sometimes it's not just the connectivity, it's affordability. How do you know if you don't ask the residents what the issue is? How do you know if you don't know what's deployed and you can't juxtapose and measure that against anything, right? Some of you may be happy with that. That's not the world that we live in moving forward. So, performance test and survey, tools to, again, get you the information that you need, again, to make better decisions and impact people where they need to be impacted. Stakeholder groups, service providers, you're not left out. You are part of this, right? Some of you have overstated coverage to the FCC, right? We know where you are, right? You go to the meetings. I've been to them. I've been to corporate board meetings. I've been to community meetings in churches. You get the same information and responses. We can no longer be afraid of the truth, right? Let's use this information. Let's use this funding to ensure that we are investing for broadband and digital equity in communities that need it. All right, so a couple more points and then I'll sit down. Who knows what this means? CYA, AYSAT. Everybody knows what CYA is, right? Cover your, could I say it, Jeff? Yes, cover your ass. And your stakeholders' asses too. That's what it means, right? That's very important, right? The directors are dealing with a number of different pressures, right, from the community, from politicians, from stakeholders, from ISPs, right? We want to ensure that they're covering their asses and the asses of their stakeholders. That means we're providing them with data and transparency and objectivity so that they can go out and speak the truth. Ultimately, that's what we want. And how do you do that, right? You get geospatial insights, you get data and information that flows from the community, you work with your service providers, right? You work with community groups, right? And let's make sure, because one thing that we do know, if you build broadband and the equity programs, we are transforming the lives of our communities where this Timmy robot that we saw earlier may be something that we see in the not too distant future everywhere. And some of you might that might scare you. If that scares you, we have ice cream tacos that's coming up that'll soothe you, make you feel better. This is not a killer robot. Right, it's not the Terminator. They're not coming to get us yet, right? Not yet, but we're working on it. Automate as much as possible. I'm going to wrap up here and get to our panel. But you want to automate as much as possible. Let's make the job easier, not harder, right? Let's not require static PDFs and Excel CSV uploads, right? and paper trails. How many of you all, and I know this for a fact, there are still ISPs that still canvass their communities with ledgers and Excel spreadsheets, and it works for them. That's not the world that we're going to live in moving forward. We want to automate this as much as possible, because guess what? If you take the NTIA money, there are so many goddamn strings attached that will keep you busy for 10 years. You will be reporting on everything that you do, at least for the useful life of all of the federal invested assets that are deployed throughout this program. So again, let's automate that process, make it easier. We know we're looking at a 10-year plus BEAD journey in digital equity, right? So we have your BEAD easy button for compliance, making sure that, again, we meet all of your needs. Almost finished here. You want to ask, you want to seek, you want to measure. You won't know what you don't ask, you won't find what you don't seek, and you won't get what you don't measure. These are the guiding principles that I think all of us should adhere to and abide by as we move forward. So the fundamental question that we're going to be dealing with our panel is, what will your legacy be? Are you going to be governed by politics, subjectivity, uncertainty, and guesswork, which is going to lead to disappointment or disaster? Or will you be guided by precision, objectivity, confidence, and results, and lead to generations of success for communities that need it? So let's get to the panel. Our first panelist, Dr. Tamarah Holmes, who leads the Virginia Broadband Office. Dr. Holmes, can you come up? All right. Now, if we had walk-up music, she would probably be something Biggie, Bad Boy, something like that. All right. We also have Sally Doty from the Mississippi Broadband Office, the director. Thank you very much. Sally's walk-up music would be definitely a band from Mississippi and definitely country. No.
Probably not.
What would it be? I don't know.
So many choices.
So many choices. Some blues, that's right. We have some really good blues in Mississippi. All right, we've got the mayor, the mom, the broadband office director, the social media and LinkedIn superstar, Mayor Jade, Piros de Carvalho from Kansas. I know I keep messing the name up. And last and certainly not least, Earnie Holtrey, the deputy director from the Indiana Broadband Office. Earnie. All right, so I'm going to take my seat here. We'll get a microphone for you all.
Did I get your seat?
No,
Made a note down.
I'll sit in the middle. We're fine. Go here. We have, really quickly, Doug, do we have the other microphone? No worries, we got it. All right, so first question. Dr. Holmes, I want to start with you because your office is probably one of the most resourced offices, having done this in the state program before. A lot of what you're doing is leading on the BEAD implementation and utilizing data. Can you talk to the audience here and give them a status update on where Virginia is and what you're doing in Virginia?
Sure.
That's all.
Can you
Just
guys
talk.
hear me?
Yep.
No?
Test. There we go. All right.
Okay. So it's funny because we talk about, the life cycle of broadband. And so our office is actually 4 years old. We were created September 2019, but we've had a last mile deployment program that goes back to 2017. And so we are one of the, I can't say largest because I think North Carolina beats us. We have about 15 staff, but we are a data-driven broadband office. I'm geeky when it comes to data, so I'm really excited about the data. And so when we were building out our office, my first 2 hires officially were GIS folks, not knowing that we would be at the point where we'd have the FCC map and the challenge process. And so we actually submitted our BEAD 5-year strategy and our Volume 1 initial proposal already to NTIA. And so currently in my iPad is the draft of our Volume 2 of the initial proposal. And so we hope to be putting that out for public comment within the next couple of weeks. And so that's kind of where we are in terms of the BEAD program.
Absolutely. And Sally, you've conducted a master class on stakeholder outreach and community engagement in Mississippi, governed by your time in the legislature. How are you using data to reach all of the broad stakeholders that you're managing in Mississippi?
There are so many different stakeholders that we have to touch, not just, people in the community who are fed up because they don't have any internet, but also those local governmental officials who hear about it all the time, state legislators. We have workforce development needs, folks we need to reach out there, and it is so good to have this data. There are a lot of myths, and I would say urban legends, but we don't have a lot of urban areas in Mississippi, so maybe rural legends, myths that are out there, and so to have data about what service actually exists has been so helpful to our office. And we're a relatively new office. I think last year at this time, we were struggling to get a computer for everybody in our office, so we've gotten up and running really fast.
Great. Jade, your unique approach to utilizing economic development districts and the data that they've collected that informs your unique approach to community engagement. Can you talk to the audience about how you're utilizing your EDDs and data, both in your BEAD, and also congratulations, you also received the Middle Mile grant that you will also be deploying as well.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And thank you, Jeff and Doug, for putting this conference on and for the invitation. Really happy to be here and to learn from all of you. So we are a small office, and the reason we're using our economic development districts, there are 8 of them in Kansas, is because we're leveraging that kind of economic development infrastructure with local government and a lot of leaders already established so that we don't have to go and meet everybody in all 105 counties. We took a hub and spoke approach. We started with a statewide conference where we tried to engage as many stakeholders as possible and talk about, this is the mission. We're not going to be able to do it alone. We need you to go out, local government officials, internet service providers, and help us get the data we need to inform these plans that are required. What is digital equity? That was a new term to a lot of people. And I think that, some of your slides weren't that uplifting. But I want to set a tone of optimism here because I feel like this conference could go down really quick and we could get really mired down in how difficult this work is. But this mission is worthy, and it's a moral imperative, this universal connectivity. So I think the fact that the stakeholder engagement in the local consult is a requirement is what makes this effort to close the digital divide so much different. Yeah, there's a lot of stakeholders, and it's impossible to please them all, but we're creating a plan based on the needs of those living in the digital divide. And they're informing where all of these dollars go. And so qualitative stories, I think, are just as important as that quantitative data, because we know that the data that we have as a benchmark from the FCC are really flawed. Those data are really flawed. So how can we take that as a baseline, but enhance it with things like speed testing? We're using, the Ready platform for speed test outreach. So I feel like I'm just all over the place. This altitude is really killing me too. I'm like,
I thought I was pretty positive though. In the
you were. Come on.
I thought it was. I don't know. All right, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Earnie, let's go to you, because if anyone knows Earnie, every time you would talk to Earnie, he's in a car driving throughout Indiana, meeting in local with communities. And Earnie, you've developed a very unique approach as well, using broadband champions and local broadband action teams. Can you talk about how you utilize data in your outreach and for your BEAD implementation as well?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, hand them your mic.
It's on?
There we go.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Jade, it wasn't the Karen slide that got you, was it?
Actually, I agree with the Karen slide. The Karens are
yeah,
killing me.
The Karens are killing you. I think they're sitting in.
But my walk-up music is "Break My Soul" by Beyonce, and they will not break my soul.
You won't break my soul. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Scott. Talking about our Broadband Ready Communities program, we've been very proud of that in Indiana. We have almost 90 now, mostly counties, but several cities and towns, and we've challenged them to take a deep dive into the permitting process, a single point of contact, treating all providers with at least an open mind on the solution that they're bringing to the table and trying to talk about what the solution provides as opposed to the name of the solution. So segueing those relationships that we had with those broadband-ready communities allowed us to really dive deep into the local engagement process. And as Jade said, it's really a blessing that is a mandate, because we saw it a priority in Indiana for years already. But I really need to segue to the importance of partnerships and technology. As an office of 2 right now, soon to be built out, hopefully soon to be built out to 14. I was just given time on my calendar to conduct interviews next week, which I'm super excited about. I don't know about the rest of the offices, but as I looked at 20, 30, 35 resumes, and hardly any of them had the word broadband on them, I'm very, very nervous about how we move forward. So I think that really talks about the importance of technology, having a resource like we've invested in Indiana with Ready and Broadband Out money, but also our relationship with the Purdue Center for Regional Development and the great work that they're doing up there with data and analytics, and Dr. Roberto Gallardo. And then finally, I remember a couple years ago I was on a call. I don't remember if Pew led it or Next Century Cities or who it may have been, but it was about the importance of coalitions. And at the time, I didn't even know what that meant. And now I'm sitting up here talking about how important it is for all of us to work together and to not reinvent the wheel, but to use existing resources and platforms and technologies so we can pull this off in the, I know Dr. Holmes will talk about the very short period of time we have to do this.
Absolutely. So let me remind everyone right now, we're going to utilize the conference app, the Mountain Connect app. If you have a question, you can use the app to submit your question. I'll get it here on my device. And again, if you have one, submit it, and we'll get that up and answered to the panel. But I have a question for the panel. So what have you learned thus far, and what are the best practices you can share with this diverse, broad group of stakeholders here at Mountain Connect? Sally, we'll start with you.
There is so much that we have learned. That's hard to know where to start. But I think best practices are to have that data available, so our office can be the source. We finally in Mississippi have one office that is the source and understands where the served locations are, where our unserved locations are, where federal funding is, where it's likely to be in the future. So it is data that is allowing us to deal with Karens, because we've had plenty.
We've got a couple.
What's the male version of Karen, too? Ken. Okay. We got some Kens and Karens, too.
Kens and Karens.
Kens and Karens.
None of them are here, by the way.
No, I hope not. I hope not. But data is really the knowledge that allows you to move ahead.
Absolutely. Dr. Holmes?
For us, we actually have been the best practice, I think, for most folks on this stage. Again, we have a program. We're currently in the state building out $935 million in broadband across 80 counties and cities, and it's been a whirlwind. But data has been really important. I mean, when we started doing deployment in Virginia, the FCC map, to be fairly honest, I'm amongst friends, right? So we were taking down the Form 477 data, it overstated coverage, and so our General Assembly in 2021 established an opportunity for us to build a location-based map, and so this was before the FCC's new map that launched. What year are we in? Was that last November? Last November, I guess, officially January of this year, and so data has been really important for us to even get where we are now, and so I just say to my colleagues on the stage, and actually I'm the last one to be adopting the Ready platform. We're still trying to make it through state procurement. I'm still checking my email. But I'm excited to be able to use the Ready platform for our challenge process, because the BEAD challenge process is very different than our state challenge process. And so we need to be able to, one, be more transparent and open. And so the CPC tool will allow us to do that in the state. If there's any providers here who have worked in Virginia, you know that process has been a bear. And so I'm really excited about being able to use a platform that my colleagues have already tested for us, unlike us testing stuff for them. And so we're a family, and so while Sally and these guys are using the Ready.net tool, and I'll learn from them how they've learned with us when we set up our deployment program. So data is really important. It's where how we got where we are and how we've been successful within Virginia. And so the Kens and Karens will continue to be there because they want broadband yesterday, even though the money just got allocated June 26th. And so we're excited. And so with that, I'll be quiet.
Jade.
I would say that I want to share a best practice actually for the providers in the room. What we have found is when you're applying for these grants and you're not engaging your community, it just isn't a solution that's it's not good for them, and it's not good for the grant evaluators. So I would encourage you, before you apply, to really do that local consult. So that's one kind of takeaway. But going back to best practices on our end, even though we're a young office, we did do some CARES Act funding grant rounds. We have a small state program. We did all of our CPF funding last year. And we've learned a lot, that whole iterate to great, like we've made a lot of missteps and learned what works. And I think what is really important is to apply technical and financial scrutiny on the front side instead of, hoping it all works out. And I remember the CARES funding, this was before I was hired, but it was given out like 50% up front and then 50% at the end of the project. Well, some of those projects didn't actually work out, right? And so there were clawback mechanisms, but there was a lot of back and forth and legal issues with getting some of that money back. So now we're trying to do all of that on the front side, and BEAD, of course, requires that. So if that's not something you're used to dealing with, it is going to be a reimbursement basis only. There are going to be measures and compliance in place along the way. And so just have that in mind. But yes, a lot of strings, tons of strings. And I think that's kind of a pushback from lessons learned from all these massive failures of trying to hand out billions and billions of dollars to end the digital divide. Like, it hasn't been successful. Why hasn't it been successful? One, we haven't engaged people from a grassroots level. We haven't had a mission to get to everybody. We've had a mission to get to most. And we haven't applied probably a level of scrutiny that we should have, so.
Earnie, same question?
Well, Jay took one of my answers. My last meeting before coming out here was with one of our federal elected officials, staff members, and some of the questions that I was answering were some really Broadband 101 questions. And one of those was, how do we know that your office isn't going to give all this money out and then they are not going to build what they're supposed to build? Well, the NOFO says so, and as Jade mentioned, we learned from the past on that, right? The legislation won't allow for that for good reason, because there's talk about importance of statistics, a lot of statistics about how much money was spent over the last X number of years, and the build out didn't happen. So now it's our chance to get it right. But one thing that keeps me up at night is controlling the message and talking with one voice. Really having everyone that's carrying the water out into these rural communities very aligned in the messaging and what we're saying, and then finally setting realistic expectations on the timeline for build out.
Yep. Let me go back to you again, Earnie. You got a great group here, Mountain Connect, again, as we heard from Jeff, over 850 that are represented. As you look forward, what are some of your significant challenges, and how can the stakeholders in this room help you achieve your mission or vision?
I think that's a perfect question for Indiana after I mentioned the size of the office. And we even know that as we bring on full-time employees over the coming weeks and months, it's going to take weeks and months, if not a year, to train them up to sit in this room and contribute in a meaningful way. So with that is again, the importance of investing into technology and having those resources available through the consultants, but then all of us knowing and understanding that we're on the same page. Yesterday, one of my breakout meetings was with a gentleman that runs a company that focuses on billing and connecting and disconnecting the homes at the very end of the spectrum. And I've sat with providers and asked them to give me a Broadband 101 and teach me what a handhole was and many other things. So I think there's a place for every one of us in this BEAD process, and it's not one single entity or one state broadband office that's going to get it done. It's all of us together for the next, as Scott mentioned, maybe 10 years.
Jade, over to you.
Challenges. Well, we anticipate a deficit of about $250 million to get to everybody. Some states have, more than they need. Some states, didn't quite get what they needed based on the formula. So I think our big ask is partnerships, engaging with our office. When it comes to regional planning, we're going to try to make broadband plans by region instead of, again, just doing everything in a silo. And we need those providers at the table with those local government officials, with the economic development people. We have provider roundtables every 2 weeks to try to keep our ISP community up to date and to get feedback from them. So I'm sure if you're in a state that does something similar, maybe not every 2 weeks, but maybe monthly or quarterly, be a part of that process. Our offices are not going to be able to solve this on our own. I'm not building 1 inch of fiber right in my office, right? So we really just ask that you continue to work with us. Asset mapping has been a huge challenge in our state because there's provider hesitance to share their route maps, and I get that. Like, I come from the provider world, and I understand that. But with the proper NDAs and just building that trust, we ask that you work with us so we know where the assets are and we can invest more wisely with these limited dollars.
Dr. Holmes?
Sure. So for us, the challenge is our program has truly been a P3 process. It's been a public-private partnership. The way our program has worked is we have units of local government apply with the private sector, and that's been a successful model. However, with BEAD, we're pivoting and having to change our process where we're working directly with the private sector. And while we've always worked with the private sector, primarily when it comes to the build-outs, it's been a three-party relationship. And so with BEAD, we're trying to make sure that we still incentivize, as Jade said earlier, that local coordination and that local stakeholder involvement. And the reason our program, to be honest with you, was set up that way to have local governments come in and then the ISP be the partner is because for decades, and some of the offenders are in this room, rural communities haven't been expanded for broadband access, and we know it's the return on investment. That's why there's so much money now to help subsidize these projects to make the math work. And so for us, the challenge is now taking what has been primarily a state program with state rules to now pivoting to now these federal rules. And I have 21 years of federal grants experience, and I will tell you, BEAD keeps me up at night. Just because the rules that are tied to BEAD kind of fit, but they're more for traditional infrastructure projects like water and sewer, which is primarily my background. And so me trying to get my mind straight on how broadband's going to be going through the federal process like NEPA and historic preservation. And I'm in Virginia, and if anyone knows about history, if we find a Civil War button when we're going to bury a piece of fiber, we've got to stop the project. And so I'm a little concerned about the rules, but we're up for the challenge. All of us are surviving through ARPA and capital project funds, which a little bit of those rules were part of that program. And so, shameless plug, if there's an NTIA person in here, I hope you all adopt some of the rules that came out through Treasury for some of the work we're currently doing, because it's made our lives a little easier. But for me, the biggest challenge is pivoting from a state-run program and funding to now what will be a fully federally funded effort.
Sal?
The challenges that I'm thinking about in Mississippi are really kind of in the future, which is once we get this built out, I'm very concerned about the take rate. Mississippi, as we know, has a disproportionate share of our citizens who live in poverty. We've been doing well the past few years. I think our unemployment rate's down to 3%. We've got a lot of new business and industry, but we still have a big pocket of areas that are low income. And I'm very concerned about the take rate in those areas, and our office is already doing what we can to publicize the ACP, work with our providers to have that low-cost service if possible. And so that is the challenge that I'm concerned about is our take rate and the sustainability of these systems that we're going to build out.
That's a great point. Going through with a couple questions from the audience. Thank you for those who submitted. The first question, we'll do this lightning round, whoever wants to take it. Does your data pool on broadband include the outcomes from digital equity training at the user level? So as we all know, digital equity is in BEAD, and there's a Digital Equity Act program that's going to follow BEAD that is investing in workforce development, device utilization, et cetera, as well. How are you tracking, or will you track those outcomes of those?
Since I have the microphone, I'll take this.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of what I talked about, is that take rate. And I think the more skills training and the more device availability that we can have, then our take rates will be higher. So it's really incumbent on us all to get those skills out into our communities and get some devices out too.
And to track that data too as those
Yeah.
programs are implemented. Anyone else on the panel want to take that one?
I'll throw it back. Talk about Dr. Gallardo again and his work. He did a study recently for our Indiana Next Level Connections funding rounds 1 through 3, and then our line extension home by home funding. I'd encourage you to look up that study. It's very informative and shows region by region in Indiana how that Next Level Connections funding changed some of the socioeconomic factors, even this short period of time. And then secondly, as Sally mentioned, with the adoption piece, our study showed in Indiana that the 8 covered populations for digital equity, in the top 3 in all 8 of the covered populations were affordability of the service and affordability of a device.
I encourage anyone that wants to look at the economic impact aspects of broadband and digital equity to check out Dr. Roberto Gallardo's work with the Purdue Center. It's really groundbreaking work that can be adapted to your communities and issues that you're working on. But definitely look at that, because that informs, again, answers a lot of the questions on the economic side of why investing in unserved and underserved communities can be positive and definitely have outcomes that are positive as we move forward. Jade, do you want to take that, or you want me to move to the next question? All right. So the next question comes, how does your office plan to leverage data to identify unserved and underserved households in multi-dwelling units, given that the national maps treat MDUs as one BSL, one broadband serviceable location?
So I'll take that. And so for us, we still have our E911 database, address database that we utilize through the Virginia Geographical Information Network. And so while the FCC map considers MDUs one unit, we do count the units individually within our state database. I know some folks for Education Superhighway are here, so I want to give them a shout out. They've been a great resource to us as well with trying to, one, identify the number of multi-dwelling properties within the state, as we get ready for the BEAD funding. And so honestly, I think the most interesting thing we found out is there are MDUs that don't have access to broadband at all. I'm actually, through our state line extension program, we've been hearing from property owners who don't have broadband to an 80-unit property that was built with low-income housing tax credits with 80 units in it, and 100% of the folks are low income. And I'm shocked that we don't have access in a lot of our multifamily properties, because I thought that the industry liked to build out to densely populated areas, and to me, I thought that MDUs would all have access to broadband, and so we're finding out that there are a lot of properties. We're partnering with our Virginia Housing, which is our entity that does the low-income housing tax credits within Virginia, and we're also looking at public housing authorities as well, because while a lot of them have access, there's issues around affordability. And so we will be, as part of our BEAD program, trying to determine how we support our MDUs to get access.
I would echo the same methodology. We did use E911 to identify thousands of households that weren't reflected on the fabric. I won't editorialize, but what the hell? Anyway, so we...
Please do, expound.
So we actually tried to challenge the fabric with that data, but of course it didn't really work that well, because the system isn't built to care. So we also are leveraging Education Superhighway out of Yinka. I think you're out here. They've been a great national partner. If you're not familiar with that nonprofit, they're doing all of this free data analytics work for states, and they've helped us identify low-income multi-dwelling units that we could target for funding. They've also done a lot of data around ACP and helped us with an outreach campaign. They estimate that 2/3 of the digital divide is actually not an access issue as far as having infrastructure run past your household. It's an adoption issue because of affordability. We also got digital connectivity technology funds, which was part of the capital projects fund. You could do all infrastructure or infrastructure and some digital inclusion and some multi-facility items, but we'll be doing a $15.5 million program in the next few months that will provide funds for multi-dwelling unit build out. So I hope providers will be interested in those funds. We're doing a sliding scale. It'll be a lot, I think, more attractive than traditional just 75% public match. So be on the lookout for that. But it's definitely something we're targeting because it's a huge gap.
And I will add one of the things and this is for my provider folks. If you're a provider that serves a multi-dwelling unit, be honest about the condition of the service at the building, because that's going to, to be honest with you, I think that's where we're going to see with the challenge process with multi-dwelling units is going to be the quality of the internet in the building, which we know doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the pipe coming to the building. It's the condition of the building. And so let's be honest about that, because again, as Scott said earlier in his opening remarks, this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment, and so we'll have an opportunity. There's some great work that Rural LISC is doing around assessing the conditions of wiring in buildings. Let's be honest about the condition of the building so we can utilize the funding to upgrade the wiring in the building so that service is not only affordable, but is accessible and actually usable. Because nothing is worse than, as a parent, all your kids trying to log on and you're trying to work and no one can get on because the service is not good within the building. And so there's a lot of innovation happening with in-building Wi-Fi for multifamily dwelling units, doing, I don't know if my friends up here have identified their public housing folks as community anchors. We did not. If you've read our challenge, we did not adopt that because we want folks to live there, so we don't want our public housing to be community anchors, but we can do things within those facilities. We get to use some CARES Act money to do some Wi-Fi in public housing in Virginia.
Yeah. I'll do a non-shameless plug for Broadband.money platform. Our data has MDUs. We treat the MDUs as secondary addresses because we believe every unit, there's a family and there's a different situation in every unit. So it's not just one broadband serviceable location. It's actually a number of different factors in each unit that will impact the quality of broadband and equity, digital equity for those families that live there. So that was a non-shameless plug. In our last few minutes, I want to go to some closing thoughts and comments, right? So we're kicking off Mountain Connect. This is the first conference post the state allocation announcement. We just had a recent announcement just last week on Buy American. So everything is moving. Your closing thoughts, right? As you visualize what comes next. How will this investment transform our communities? And more importantly, what happens to those who get left behind? And I don't want to end on a negative, so let's end on a positive. Since no one's going to be left behind, how is this going to transform our communities as we look forward in the future?
That's what I was going to say. It is our job up here to make sure that no one does get left behind. And it is a big job, especially in a rural, low-income state. We all have different challenges. I did some traveling up in Wyoming last week, and I was thinking, man, I'm glad I don't have these stretches of mountainous areas. But we all have our particular challenges, and in Mississippi, it is going to be the take rate, poverty issues in these low-income areas. But I think that it's going to be so transformational for so many states. It's going to provide such opportunities. I'll speak for my state. We have a great quality of life, beautiful land, open spaces. Everybody wants to, live out in the country and have 5 acres and a pond. And, it's a great way to live your life. And now people are going to be able to combine that lifestyle with participation in the digital economy. So healthcare, education, you all know it. I don't think I have to say it. It's going to be transformational.
And so for us, the story is going to be Virginia closes the digital divide with BEAD money. That is going to be the story for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our $1.48 billion, yes, billion with the B, allocation will allow us to finish the job we've been doing the last 6 years, and from an access standpoint in terms of infrastructure, get that job done. And also allow us to start looking at things like adoption and affordability with some of the non-deployment opportunities through BEAD. And so my governor, Governor Youngkin, is committed to ensuring every Virginia business, home, and community anchor has access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet, and that will happen with the BEAD funding.
Jade?
Kind of, you know, we all talk about healthcare, education, but I think what Leonard touched on earlier and Jeff touched on is that we don't even have a clue how transformational this is going to be, because the technologies that this will enable are going to change our lives in ways we can't even imagine. I will say that I always refer to this as not internet for all, but opportunity for all, because I think broadband is an opportunity equalizer, and it's going to raise everybody's going to be on a level playing field. I mean, I know there's so many other issues that we have to tackle as a country, but it is going to levelize a lot of opportunities for kids, for adults. And the last thing I'll say about how it's going to transform Kansas is agriculture is our largest industry sector, and our farmers are really struggling right now in these rural areas. They just can't adopt the next generation internet-enabled technology, and so they're losing out on the productivity and the yields and the market share that they could have, and I think it's really going to change our ag industry.
I think that's a great point, too. Indiana is large with agriculture as well, and I've seen some demos recently, and sometimes we hear about technology replacing workers, but I think maybe with an all-time low unemployment in the country, that can be a good thing, because we can then move those workers into different fields, right? So instead of driving a combine, someone can be installing the connectivity to the combine or doing the analytics in the air-conditioned room. So that quality of life changes right away. And then I think, mindset is still a big thing in these rural communities, and as we talk about, they'll be able to do online banking and doctor's office visits from their home, and then we roll out a robot here today. So, it's amazing what's going to be coming, and it's excited to be a part of it.
All right, well, everyone, please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you here. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. Jason.
We're going to survive this altitude.
I know. Hook or crook.
Wow, that was an amazing session, so thank you to our keynote. Now, a couple things before you depart. If you, I think, and Scott touched on this, please download the app, because you'll be able to, thank you, submit questions in any session you attend throughout the day. Sessions do begin at 10 a.m., and we have some special guests coming for lunch. So all you people in the back need to move forward. Otherwise, I'll embarrass you in front of the governor. Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here this morning, and look forward to seeing you at lunch.